What's good? What's good, Team TC? Red Room affiliates. It's been a while, man. Good to see you guys. I hope everything is well. I hope you're having a beautiful Sunday. Listen, you know, Tupac Shakur passed September 13th, 1996. And for 30 years, he's been the talk of the town. For 30 years, we've heard rumors, conspiracy theories, just about everything you can possibly think of. First, it was Suge Knight, the theory about Suge Knight setting Pac up because it was widely speculated that Pac was planning on leaving death row. Then we heard the rumors about Diddy putting the hit on both Tupac and Suge due to their, bitter rivalry. Then we heard conspiracies about the government. It was the government that set up Pac. They did it. They wanted Pac out of the way for whatever reason. Who knows, right? And then we heard that, Pac faked his death, right? He faked his death and he was actually alive and well and he was hiding out in Cuba, right? Cuba, and it's crazy. There's been a lot of crazy things over the past 3 decades. And like I said, we've heard the rumors, all the conspiracy theories, but it would seem like all of this is coming to a head now because the truth is finally about to come out. Keefe D, the man who has done countless interviews with DJ Vlad, Art of Dialogue, as well as many other platforms, who has totally taken credit and implicates himself as the shot caller, who played a direct part in the untimely demise of Tupac Shakur. This is something that he's bragged about over and over again, doing multiple interviews, and it's crazy how brazen he's been doing these interviews, right? He's very braggadocious. He would laugh at times. He would be seen making jokes, as if it was all something that, he just didn't take seriously at all. He truly believed, in my opinion, that he was untouchable. He seemed to be under that impression. And I remember at one point, I believe it was during the interview with the Art of Dialogue, where he said that as the shots rang out, Tupac tried to jump in the back seat and he looked as if he was breakdancing. I mean, the man has even gone so far as to write a book, right? And in this book, Keefe D literally incriminates himself, claiming that he was the man who passed the gun to the man who shot Tupac, right, in Vegas. But see, as the saying goes, the things that'll make you laugh will ultimately make you cry. Because now Keefe D is about to stand trial for the murder of one Tupac Shakur. And that trial starts officially tomorrow. Tomorrow. Keefe D will be standing trial for the murder of Tupac Shakur tomorrow, less than 24 hours from the recording of this video. See, 30 years later, my good people, 30 years later, here we are. I'm not a street guy. I'm not a gangster. I'm not a thug. I don't pretend to be. But I do know enough about the street life to know that if you're going to be out here doing dirt, the one thing you don't do is go around telling everybody what you've done after the fact. You don't go on public platforms and self-snitch under any circumstances, even if you think you have some type of immunity deal with law enforcement. And this is the issue for Keefe D, because Keefe D was under the impression that he had total immunity after signing a proffer agreement with the federal prosecution and the LAPD back in 2008 in '09. Now, for those of you who don't know, a proffer deal is an agreement legally binding. A proffer agreement, is a legally binding contract between the federal prosecutor and a person under investigation. Now, it's also important to know that this agreement only provides temporary protection. Meaning that any statements made cannot be used against you in a criminal trial. And it's also important to know that this type of deal doesn't offer immunity. It doesn't offer immunity at all. All statements have to be 100% truthful. Any false statements, anything you lie about, the deal is immediately nullified and everything is off the table. So, yeah, that's how that goes. That's how that goes. You guys still with me? Getting this? This is exciting, man. We've been waiting a long time for this. 30 years, and here we are. So, in Keefe D's case, he's clearly under the impression that his proffer agreement gave him total immunity, and it did not. And this is why, ladies and gentlemen, we have to make sure that when we sign any type of agreement, no matter how big or small, you always read the fine print. Especially in a situation like this. I mean, you didn't check to see if the deal made with the feds and the LAPD back in '08 and '09 granted you total immunity. You didn't bother to check that? His lawyer at the time didn't bother to ask about that? And see, here's the problem for Keefe D. Even if the proffer agreement he signed with the feds and the LAPD did give him total immunity, let's say it did give him total immunity. The problem is that he made a deal with the feds and LAPD. And the shooting took place in Las Vegas. That's his problem. What he did between whatever deal he made between the feds and LA and the LAPD, that's got nothing to do with Las Vegas, Nevada. So this goes to show you that Keefe D is truly, he's an idiot. He's an idiot. This is a man who is in love with the sound of his own voice. And if you're a gangster, if you're living that street life, that is one of the worst things. That's one of the worst traits you can have. Because you talk just to hear yourself talk. And you'll talk to anybody that'll listen. And you'll say things that will incriminate you, even other people. Like, this is not a good thing. And one thing I do know about the street life is that when it comes to gangsters, gangsters move in silence. That is the quote unquote code that they've always lived by. You move in silence. You don't go around airing things out that could get you and other people jammed up. So to me, the fact that he's oblivious to that is just it's just amazing. To me, it's astonishing. The lack of self-awareness that Keefe D clearly possesses. And he just can't stop talking. He can't help himself. He's done several interviews in the days leading up to the trial. And now, one of the new claims he's making is that both he and Suge Knight together were running Death Row Records. And because of this, there was no need for him to try to take out Tupac, because Tupac at the time was their biggest moneymaker. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but I've never heard anything about Keefe D being a co-owner of Death Row Records. He's never made this claim until now that I know of. Maybe I could be wrong about that. Maybe some of y'all out there have heard him make that claim. I've never heard him say that until now. I've never even heard Suge Knight say that. I've never heard Suge Knight mention that Keefe D was a co-owner of Death Row Records and that together, they were making moves on behalf of the label. Never heard that. So, the lady who did the interview, well, actually, hold on. I want to make sure I get this right. So, to me, Keefe D is a man who's desperate because he's looking at life. He's looking at a life sentence at the age of 63 years old. And this is what you would call the worst case scenario, in my opinion. It doesn't get no worse than this. And then the lady who did the interview from News Channel 8, I believe, local channel, it was a local channel. This interview took place a little over a week ago. And like I said, he just can't stop talking. You're days away from a trial, from a murder trial, and you're still doing interviews. Like, I can imagine Keefe D's lawyer telling him not to do this interview. I can imagine his lawyer advising him not to do the interview. But Keefe D, being the man that he is, being someone who's in love with the sound of their own voice, remember I told you he can't help but talk. He's willing to talk to anybody that would sit down with him and listen. This is why you're here, Keefe D. This is why you're facing life behind bars at 63 years old, because you can't stop talking. The lady who did the interview, I can't remember her name, she asked Keefe D if he was offered a plea deal. And he says that he was never offered a plea deal, but that he heard that the prosecution was offering between 10 to 25 years. Well, if that's what you heard, that means that you were offered a deal. Right? You may have turned it down, which is exactly what he did. He turned it down, but that means you were offered a deal ultimately. So, and then he goes on to say that he wasn't even in Vegas. Now the story changes. All these years you put yourself in Vegas. Now you were never there. But it just doesn't make sense. I mean, Keefe is a man who's truly desperate, you know, because not only do you put yourself in Vegas, but you also put yourself in the car that the shots came from that would ultimately end up taking the life of one Tupac Shakur. I mean, Keefe D has got to be the dumbest gangster on the face of the planet. Another problem he has is that he made a profit from these interviews that he's done over the years. He's made a profit from these interviews and also the book as well. And even though he's now claiming he didn't actually write the book, in my opinion, he definitely provided the words for the book. You know, I don't think I can believe him when he said he didn't write the book, as in he didn't sit down and literally type, you know, everything that was in the book. No, you probably didn't do that. But you probably sat down with somebody and told them what you wanted them to know, what you wanted them to hear. And now those things are in the book. So, you know, you didn't write the book, but the words in the book came from Keefe D himself, in my opinion. You know, I could be wrong, but that's my opinion. And in this same book, he told everybody to go out and get it because it was the truth. So now, at first, when you were doing these interviews, you told everybody to go out and get the book. You actually took the book and you held it up. You held the book up and said, go get this right here. This is the truth. Don't believe what you're hearing from anybody else. You know, don't listen to what anybody else is saying. This is the truth right here. This right here is the truth. This book right here is the truth. Go get that. Now you're saying you had no parts in it. Again, a man who just can't help himself. And what's crazy is he's claiming that he didn't even read He's claiming he didn't even read the book. First, you was advertising the book, wanting everybody and their mom to go out and get it. Now you're saying you didn't even read the book? You say you didn't write the book. You didn't read the book. Again, a complete lack of self-awareness. How could you not read a book that implicates you in a murder you now claim you never played a part in? he said that his attorney gave him a script. His attorney at the time provided him with a script. A script for what, Keefe D? A script to implicate you again in a murder that you had nothing to do with? First of all, what the hell kind of lawyer is that? And how did he ever pass the bar exam? And here's my thing. Even if that's true, your attorney offers you a script, tells you, hey man, just go along with this right here, trust me. You mean you did it? You just went along with it? I would have fired him immediately. Why would you want me to go along with a story that implicates me in a murder that I didn't have anything to do with? What's the end game here? Is this the end game? For Keefe D to end up on trial for a murder or a crime he didn't have nothing to do with? Facing life in prison? You know, I don't believe that one bit. And if I'm said attorney and if I'm still practicing, I might be looking at possibly filing a suit against Keefe D, excuse me, for his statements. And because that's highly inflammatory. And like I said earlier, he also claims that Reggie White Jr. is directly involved, and it's being alleged that Reggie White Jr. was complicit in Tupac's murder because he was the security for Suge Knight and Death Row Records at the time. And he was also personal security for Tupac. And prior to the fight in Vegas, Tupac actually fired Reggie Wright Jr. fired him from being his personal security. And supposedly Reggie Wright felt some kind of way about that. And, you know, unfortunately for Reggie Wright, you know, your personal feelings don't have anything to do with the fact that you still work for Suge Knight and Death Row Records. It doesn't matter that you no longer work for Pac. You still work for Suge. So if Suge Knight tells you to put extra security on Tupac, that's exactly what you do. You don't get to say, well, Tupac fired me as his personal security, so I'm not going to do what Suge says. That's got nothing to do with Suge. That's between you and Pac. You know? So I don't trust Keefe D. He's a fish out of water, and he knows the walls are closing in on him, and fast. And I also don't trust Reggie Wright Jr. because who would trust him? Corrupt cop. You know, he signed a proffer. Reggie Wright also signed a proffer agreement back in, I don't want to say the wrong year. But he also signed a proffer agreement. And I'm not sure if it may have been before Keefe D signed his. I can't remember, but he does have a proffer agreement that he signed way back when, either around that time or before. So I don't trust Keefe D or Reggie Wright Jr. because all he's done is lie, you know. And this is just a crazy case all the way around. You know how even the cops in LA, you know, Reggie was a cop. I think his father was a cop. And we all know how LAPD gets down. But again, this isn't about the LAPD. The shooting didn't happen in LA. You know, it took place in Vegas. And because of that, you know, here we are. You know, if Keefe D had just kept his mouth closed, we wouldn't even be here. 30 years later, about to, you know, witness one of the biggest trials in pop culture. You know, because this is going to be heavy. And you know, I'm going to keep a close eye on this. We're all going to keep a close eye on this because me personally, at the end of the day, I'm a Tupac fan all day. And in the end, we just want the truth and we want justice for Tupac and his family, you know. And so ultimately, you know, you guys tell me, what do y'all think? Make sure you drop your comments down below and, you know, get it in, man. Let me know what y'all think about this crazy case and all its twists and turns. You know, this is going to be a whirlwind. I can tell you that. And I think it's supposed to last about 4 to 6 weeks. And so, yeah, all eyes on Vegas. You know, all eyes on Vegas, and ultimately, all eyes on Keefe D. You know, you wanted to be in the spotlight, and you got it. You know, as the saying goes, careful what you wish for, because it just may come to pass, man. It just may come to pass. All right? So, with that being said, Team TC, Red Room Affiliates, it is your guy, man. And I'm wishing you guys a happy Sunday. You know, Truest Dude signing off and reminding all of you to be you, be true. And, yeah, man, we out. To the next episode, all right? Peace, y'all.